What if a simple stencil could tell a story of hope, strength, and encouragement? In today's video, I'm sharing a beautiful nature inspired card that does exactly that. Using one gorgeous layering stencil, soft ink blending, and touch of sparkle, we'll create a peaceful scene that's perfect for sending love and uplifting someone who needs it. Hello, crafty friends. I'm Revati, and welcome to my crafty space. You may have seen me use the Craft Your Life project kit Garden Gala in several of my previous videos. I have reached out for the stamp, the coordinating layering stencils, embossing folder, and matching dies time and time again, and for good reason. This has quickly become one of my absolute favorite Altenew releases. Whenever I'm looking to create a card with a big, bold floral focal point, this is always the first set that I reach out for. It's incredibly versatile, so easy to work with, and it never fails to create a stunning card. I absolutely love this embossing folder, and it's not just the floral image that the die cuts out, but also those big bold sentiments. For today's project, we are going to use a part of this set that I have never tried before. Instead of focusing on the floral layering stencils, we'll be creating a beautiful landscape scene using the landscape building stencils that is included in this set. Well, we have a total of 7 stencils here, and I have used all of the floral layering stencils many times before, but this is my very first time reaching out for that landscape stencil. Well, to be honest, I had always felt a little intimidated by it. I wasn't sure if I'd be able to do justice or create a scene that looked natural. But while I was creating this card, I finally gave it a try, and I couldn't believe how easy it was to use. The layering practically guides you through the process, and the finished scene comes together so effortlessly. I absolutely love how this card turned out, and I think it's a great reminder that sometimes the products we are most hesitant to try end up becoming our favorites. So here I have pulled out 4 stencils from the set. 2 of them work together to create a beautiful arched frame and its coordinating negative mask. And the other 2 are the landscape stencils, included one which has all these tiny little pieces attached to the acetate sheet. Now those small pieces act as a mask, allowing you to layer different in colors and build depth and dimension and beautifully detailed landscape scene. I started by placing a white card panel onto my ultra sticky mat and centered the stencil right over it. At this point, my plan was to create a simple one-layered card, so I ink blended directly onto the full panel. Now, you'll notice later in the video that I actually ended up trimming down this ink blended panel. That definitely wasn't part of the original plan. As I continued building up the color and saw the scene come to life, I changed my mind and decided to give the finished design a different look. I decided to build my scene from the bottom up, so you'll see me placing some small masking piece over the upper layers as I work my way through the landscape. I held these in place with a little bit of washi tape. These masks make it easy to keep each layer crisp and well defined while adding the different colors. For my color palette, I reached out for several shades of greens from the Mediterranean Glow ink set because I wanted to create a rustic mountain inspired landscape. To finish off the scene, I blended in warm shades of yellow and orange for the sky, creating a soft glow of a beautiful sunset. I began with the darkest green in the Mediterranean Glow set, which is sugar kelp, and ink blended it onto the bottom layer of the landscape. Once I finished that first layer, I realized I wanted the entire scene to have a soft ombre effect rather than distinct bands of color. So I went back and lightly blended the same shade into the areas that had been initially masked off. Now, as I worked my way up the landscape, I gradually switched to the lighter shades of green. Now, the Mediterranean Glow palette has 4 different shades of green, so it is easy to match up the colors. This creates a beautiful transition with the darkest green anchoring the foreground and the lighter greens giving that distinct mountains a softer and more atmospheric look. By the end, the only masks I kept in place were the ones around the sun because I wanted to keep that area free from any green ink. For the mountains, however, I preferred removing the masks as I blended. That allowed the colors to overlap slightly and created a much softer and more natural ombre transition across the entire landscape. As I was blending, I made sure to hold down those delicate narrow stencil lines that separate each of the mountain layers. Even though I was creating a soft ombre transition, I wanted to preserve those crisp white lines between the layers because they add so much definition and depth to the scene. For intricate stencils like this, I would actually recommend giving the back of the stencil a light coat of the pixie spray. It's a low tack adhesive that temporarily holds the stencil in place while you ink blend, and it peels away cleanly without damaging your cardstock. I hadn't planned that ahead, so I didn't have any stencil prepped with the pixie spray. So I simply held those tiny stencil bridges in place with my fingers as I ink blended. That helped prevent any ink from sneaking underneath and kept those fine white lines nice and crisp. Once I was happy with the mountains, it was time to bring the sun to life. I started by blending a soft light yellow at the center, then gradually added warmer shades of yellow and orange around it to create that beautiful glowing sun. The smooth color transition gives the sun a warm, radiant look and really brings the entire landscape scene together. With all the ink blending complete, our beautiful stencil landscape is ready. But I wanted to take it a step further and add a little extra shine and shimmer to the background. I carefully removed all the masking pieces, but instead of lifting the stencil off right away, I decided to keep the entire stencil assembly in place and take it straight into my splatter box. This allowed the stencil to act as a guide while I sprayed the panel with an iridescent ink spray. I absolutely love the gorgeous shimmer and the subtle sparkle it adds to the stenciled image. It gives the landscape such a magical, almost dreamy feel while still allowing all that beautiful blended colors to shine through. Once the entire panel was covered, I carefully removed the stencil and set the piece aside to dry. While the shimmer does its magic, we can move on to creating a beautiful frame to finish our panel. I absolutely love the gorgeous shine and shimmer that this iridescent spray added to our background. To highlight this beautiful stencil scene, I decided to create a frame around it using the nesting arches die set. I used two sizes of the arch dies to create a frame that perfectly complements the landscape image. For the frame, I chose black cardstock because I love how the contrast helps the colors and the shimmer in the background stand out. My initial plan was to simply place this frame right over the stencil panel and add a sentiment on top. But as I was putting everything together, I had a change of heart and I realized this beautiful scene deserved a little more attention. That's when I decided to die cut the entire stencil piece and layer it onto another beautifully ink blended background for a more finished and elevated look. I used the larger arch die that I had previously used to create my frame and carefully placed it over my stenciled panel. I made sure to secure the die firmly in place before running it through my die cutting machine so that it wouldn't shift during the process. At this point, I was honestly a little nervous because I had spent so much time building up this beautiful blended layer, and I really didn't want to risk damaging this gorgeous landscape panel. But with a little care and patience, I die cut the panel and it came out completely perfect. And I was ready to layer it on top of my next piece of my cut design. Before we work on the background, I decided to adhere the frame in place around this beautiful landscape panel. You could definitely take this design a step further by adding multiple layers of the frame and turning it into a shaker card, which would look absolutely stunning with this scene. But for today's project, I wanted to keep things a little more simple and let the gorgeous stenciled landscape be the main focus. So I decided just a single layer of the frame, giving it a clean and elegant finished look. For delicate pieces like this, I definitely prefer using liquid glue rather than a strong adhesive. The liquid glue gives me a little bit wiggle room, allowing me to adjust and perfectly align the frame before it completely sets. Now, for the background, I wanted to bring out another beautiful stencil, one again which I have actually never really used. Now, this gorgeous texture details comes from the magnificent Magnolia set, which again is one of the Craft Your Life project kits by Altenew that I absolutely love. Now, I chose this particular stencil because I wanted to add some subtle interest and texture to the background while still keeping the focus on our beautiful landscape scene that we just created. I wanted something that would complement the design, enhance the overall look, and add that extra layer of detail without overpowering the stenciled mountains and our sunset. I picked an A2 size panel and I placed it on my ultra sticky mat and got ready to add some subtle texture to the background. For my colors, I decided to continue with the same beautiful set of greens from the Mediterranean Glow ink set so that everything would coordinate beautifully with our landscape scene. For one layer of the stencil, I used the sugar kelp, which is the darkest green from the set, and for the second layer, I used Olaf. The combination of these two shades created that beautiful natural looking background that complements the mountains while still allowing the framed landscape to remain the star of our card. To tone down the stark white cardstock showing through the stenciled background, I decided to add a little bit of ink blending using the same green shades that I used for the stencil layers. Now, this step is completely optional, but I personally love adding a touch of soft wash of color to my backgrounds rather than leaving the white cardstock completely untouched. Especially for nature inspired designs like this one, a little bit of extra ink blending helps everything feel more cohesive and gives the background a softer, more finished look while still keeping the beautiful stencil detail visible. I then took this panel over to my splatter box and added some jet black splatters all across the background. These little splatters add just the right amount of texture and contrast while also helping tie everything together with, especially with our black frame around that landscape piece. While my background panel was drying, I went ahead and added the sentiment to our beautiful landscape scene. Now, the Garden Gala set includes these gorgeous curved sentiments, and I felt like this one was perfect fit for the scene and the overall layout for the card. The peaceful landscape really inspired me to create a card that sends out strength, encouragement, and positive vibes, which is why I chose this particular sentiment. Now, to make the sentiment stand out, I decided to heat emboss it. I stamped it using obsidian black pigment ink and then added a layer of clear embossing powder before heat setting it. The embossed finish adds a beautiful subtle shine while keeping the sentiment crisp and easy to read against our absolutely gorgeous and colorful background. And with that, all the main components of our card are ready. Now it's time to bring everything together and assemble our final design. Since this beautiful landscape piece is the main focal point of our card, I decided to add some dimension by popping it up with foam tape. It helps it stand out from the background and really draws your attention to the gorgeous stencil scene that we created. I then added this entire assembly onto a top folding A2 size card base, and since my landscape was already popped up, I decided to directly glue the panel on my card base. For some finishing touches, I added a few crystal moonlight stellar sequences around the design. These were perfect embellishment choice because they beautifully coordinate with the shimmer and sparkle in our iridescent background, adding just a little extra shine without taking away from the landscape. And with that, our beautiful landscape card is complete. I absolutely love how this project came together, especially because we used a part of the Garden Gala set that I had never tried before. It was such a fun reminder that sometimes the products we feel a little intimidated by can create the most beautiful results. I hope this card inspires you to look at your stencils in a new way and try creating your own scenic backgrounds. If you enjoy this project, be sure to check out my playlist where I share more cards and creative ideas using the Garden Gala set. I'll be also sure to link all the supplies that I used to create this particular card in the description box below. Please note that all of those links are affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of my links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe.